The Korath system floated in the darkness of deep space, its twin suns casting pale light over the scattered planets. Around the human colony of New Eden, a shadow had fallen, the shadow of the Galactic Empire's main battle fleet. 4,000 alien warships surrounded the small blue and green world. Their hulls were sharp and angular, painted in the deep red of the imperial crest. Engines glowed like angry eyes in the void. The fleet moved with the slow, steady confidence of a predator that had already trapped its prey. On the imperial flagship, Blood Sovereign Commander Sarith stood on the bridge, hands behind his back, staring at the planet. His scaled face curled into a satisfied smile. Pathetic, he muttered to his second officer. This is the best they have left. Through the wide bridge windows, Sarith could see a handful of human patrol ships in orbit, small, outdated. Frigates and corvettes. They looked like toys compared to the massive destroyers and battleships of the Empire. The humans fired a few cautious shots, but none came close to damaging Imperial shields. Reports from the Imperial Intelligence Corps were clear. Humanity was nearly broken. Their great fleets had been shattered in earlier wars. What was left of their navy was scattered and weak. Today, the Empire would take New Eden and wipe away another human colony. But as Sarith watched, something began to bother him. The human ships were fighting differently. They didn't attack recklessly. They didn't try desperate maneuvers. Instead, they moved with strange precision, pulling back at exactly the right moments, avoiding the heaviest fire. Why do they not flee? Sarith asked aloud. They cannot win this battle. His second officer shrugged. Perhaps they are too proud to run. But Sarith was not convinced. Down on the surface of New Eden, Captain Elara Voss stood inside the underground command center, watching the same battle unfold on her tactical screen. Her uniform was dusty, her dark hair tied back in a simple braid. Around her, officers monitored comms, weapon status, and defense shields. Status of the first wave, she asked. A young officer replied, holding position in high orbit. Captain, light losses so far. Ilara's eyes stayed on the map. The first wave, that was what she called the small fleet in orbit. Everyone else in the system thought it was their only fleet. That lie had to be maintained. Send the message, she ordered. The comms officer nodded and tapped in a short code. A tight beam transmission left the colony, shooting silently into the darkness of space. The message was simple. The first wave holds. Await the signal. Ilara knew what it meant. The ones who needed to hear it would hear it, and they would come. Back on the Blood Sovereign, Sareth's sensors picked up the faint human transmission. He frowned. Can we break it? He asked. No, Commander, the comms officer said. It's encrypted. Very old code. Human military. Design, Sarith snorted. Irrelevant. Soon they will have no one to send messages to. He watched as the human ships began to drift toward a dense asteroid field on the far side of the planet. Their formation broke apart, slipping between chunks of rock and ice. Retreat, Sarith said with contempt, as expected. But deep inside, the word didn't feel right. This was too clean, too orderly, not the panic of a losing fleet. More like a planned movement. The battle quieted. No more human ships fired on the Empire. The asteroid field swallowed them. Sarith turned away from the window, certain that the humans would soon be hunted down inside the rocks. And then it happened. A sound low, deep, almost like the growl of a massive beast, rolled through the comms network. It wasn't a transmission. It was a resonance, a vibration that ran through the ship's hull. Crew members looked up from their stations. "What is that?" the second officer asked. "Interference." "The comms team suggested." Sereth felt his scales tighten. "That is no interference. That is deliberate." Across the fleet, alien crews heard the same sound. It was faint but constant, like a drumbeat from somewhere far away. The Imperial fleet's AI tried to isolate the source, but failed. The sound was coming from everywhere, down in New Eden's command center. Captain Elara heard it too. Her officers looked at her, uneasy. "Captain, what is that noise?" She allowed herself a small smile. "That," she said, "is the sound of a promise." In the darkness beyond the Korath system, light bent strangely around something massive. The deep resonance pulsed once more, as if answering the signal from New Eden, and then the stars in that region seemed to shift, like something huge had moved. Between them and the observers, back on the Blood Sovereign, Sareth stared out into the void, an unfamiliar chill settling in his chest. He didn't know why, but for the first time in the campaign against humanity, he felt uneasy. The sound continued, steady and patient, and then, just as quickly as it began, it faded away. Silence returned to the battlefield. The humans inside. The asteroid field made no move to return. The Imperial fleet tightened its grip on New Eden, ready to end the fight. But somewhere out there, beyond the reach of Imperial scanners, something had heard the call. Something was coming. The Imperial fleet remained in high orbit over New Eden, their blockade unbroken. Hours had passed since the human ships vanished into the asteroid field. The silence that followed felt wrong dot on the Blood Sovereign commander. Sereth paced the bridge, his clawed feet tapping against the metal floor. "Any sign of them?" he demanded. "Negative, Commander," the sensor officer replied. "No heat signatures, no weapons fire. It's as if they're gone." Sareth narrowed his eyes. Humans did not simply vanish. They were stubborn, loud, and always left a trace when they fought. He had learned this in the earlier campaigns. Yet here, in the shadow of victory, he felt no satisfaction, only a slow, creeping doubt. His second officer stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I have heard old stories, Commander. Tales told by the veterans of the First Expansion War. They speak of a force, a hidden fleet that humanity keeps far from any battlefield. A fleet they bring out only when the war is truly lost." Sareth gave a cold laugh. "Legends, myths to frighten recruits." "Perhaps," the second officer said. "But the humans called it the core fleet." Sareth scoffed, but the words stayed in his mind like an itch he could not scratch. Far below, inside the fortified bunkers of New Eden, Captain Elara Voss moved through the command center. The air was heavy with tension. Officers studied sensor feeds, intercepted transmissions, and power readouts from the surface defense grid. "How long until the planetary shields fail?" she asked. 18 hours, Captain," an officer replied. "If they concentrate all firepower." Elara nodded. 18 hours, more than enough time if the plan held. She paused at the comm station, where a message had just been received from the outer colonies. It was short, only 2 words. "Signal. Received." For a moment, Elara let herself breathe easier. The first wave had done its job. Now it was just a matter of waiting. Outside the bunkers, the colony lay under an eerie calm. Streets were empty, homes locked and abandoned. Families were hidden deep underground, listening to the distant thunder of the Imperial fleet's engines in the sky. in one shelter. A boy no older than 8 sat drawing on the wall with a piece of chalk. His mother watched quietly as he sketched massive starships, each one bigger than the last. "Where did you see those?" she asked softly. "I didn't," the boy said. "Grandpa told me. He said one day they'll come and save us. The big ships from the dark places where no one goes." Back on the Blood Sovereign, the prisoner was brought to Sareth's ready room. A human naval officer, gaunt but defiant, stood in chains. "You were on one of those ships that ran," Sareth said, circling him. "Where did you go? What is hiding in that asteroid field?" The human smirked. "You think we ran? You vanished," Sareth said. "That is the same thing." The human leaned forward slightly, voice low and calm. "Commander, what you've seen here, these old ships, the crews you fought today, that's not even our full force." Sareth's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" But the prisoner only laughed, a slow, knowing laugh that made the alien's scales crawl. Moments later, the human was taken back to the brig, but the words hung in Sareth's mind, far beyond the Korath system. In the frozen reaches of the Kuiper expanse, the void itself seemed to twist. Massive shadows moved where there should have been none. The humanity main fleet, known only in whispers as Project Titan, drifted in the darkness. These were no ordinary warships. Each vessel was a fortress of steel and light, some the size of small moons. Their armor absorbed starlight. Their engines glowed faintly, like the embers of a sleeping giant. On the bridge of the lead dreadnought, Indomitable, Admiral Kane stood with his hands resting on the tactical display. He was a tall, broad-shouldered man with a lined face and cold eyes. A comes officer approached. "Sir, the signal from New Eden has arrived." Kane's jaw tightened. "Time, 72 hours, Admiral. They are holding." Kane nodded slowly. "Then we hold, for now." The fleet remained motionless, hidden from Imperial sensors. Hundreds of ships, each bristling with weapons never before used in open war, waited for the order to move. In the silence, Kane's voice carried across the bridge. "When the time comes, the galaxy will remember what it means to fear humanity." Back in the Korath system, the Empire tightened its grip on New Eden. Supply ships moved into position for occupation. Bombardment plans were drawn, and yet the alien crews felt the unease growing. Small things began to happen. An Imperial patrol vanished without a trace near the asteroid field. Another reported strange sensor echoes, shapes too large to be asteroids, moving with unnatural precision. Sareth dismissed the reports publicly, but privately, he reviewed them again and again. The same faint vibration that had rolled through. The fleet earlier seemed to return at random intervals, too weak to locate, but strong enough to make the hairs along his neck rise. It was as if something vast was watching from just beyond, the edge of sight, and in the hidden depths of space. Far from the battle, the main fleet waited, patient, silent, and ready to answer the call. The Kuiper expanse was a place few dared to travel. It was far beyond the warm glow of any sun, a frozen graveyard of rock and ice drifting in endless darkness. Here, the void was heavy and silent, a silence so complete it felt alive. In that cold emptiness, something moved. A shadow larger than any asteroid slid across the stars. Then another, and another. They were too perfect in shape, too smooth, too deliberate. These were not rocks. They were ships. Human ships, each the size of a city. The humanity main fleet had awakened. The lead vessel, the dreadnought, indomitable, loomed like a mountain of steel against the void. Its black hull swallowed light, broken only by the faint pulsing glow of its engine cores. Along its sides, gun batteries sat silent but ready, each one capable of tearing through a capital ship in a single strike. Inside, Admiral Kane stood, at the center of the command deck, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of the Korath system. Tiny red dots marked the position of the Galactic Empire's fleet, thousands of them clustered tightly around. "New Eden status report," Kane said. "Fleet is fully armed and operational," replied Captain Rourke, his second in command. "Cloak fields holding. No sign the Empire has detected us." Kane nodded slowly. "Good. Maintain distance. No movement until the signal changes." He didn't need to explain why. Surprise was their greatest weapon. Let the Empire believe. The first wave was all humanity had left. Let them grow comfortable. The strike, when it came, would be all the more devastating. Back in the Korath system, Commander Sarath was not comfortable. He sat alone in his quarters, reading through old Imperial battle logs from the First Expansion War. Many of the records were classified even to him, but his rank allowed limited access. The files spoke of encounters with human fleets that seemed to appear from nowhere. Overwhelming forces, many times their size before vanishing again. The details were vague. Some reports described ships so massive they blotted out the stars, weapons that could erase entire formations in seconds. The logs always ended the same way. Imperial forces withdrew. Engagement inconclusive. Sarath leaned back in his chair, his claws drumming on the desk. Myths, he told himself again. And yet, a chime broke his thoughts. His second officer's voice came over the com. "Commander, another patrol has failed to report in. Same location, near the asteroid field." Sarath's brow furrowed. "Send a destroyer squadron to investigate. Full sensor sweep." The destroyers entered the asteroid field with shields raised and weapons armed. The field was dense, the rocks tumbling in slow motion, casting long shadows in the pale starlight. The Imperial crews scanned the dark, gaps between the drifting stones, but they found nothing until one of the ships detected a faint energy. Reading, source. The captain demanded. "Unknown," replied the sensor officer. "It's large, very large, moving." Before the captain could order a retreat, the stars seemed to shift above them. A shape emerged from the darkness, so huge it filled every view screen. It wasn't an asteroid. It was a human warship. No lights, no comms, just the silent black shape drifting past. Its hull was featureless, except for the faint outline of enormous gun batteries. The Imperial destroyers froze, unsure whether to fire or flee, and then, without a word, the massive ship's engines flared for an instant, and the nearest destroyer simply vanished in a burst of light. The others ran. The report reached Sarath. Within minutes, "Sir," the shaken captain of the surviving destroyer said over comms, We've seen something. A ship, larger than anything in our database." It didn't speak. It didn't negotiate. It just, the transmission cut off. Static filled the channel. Sarath's jaw tightened. "Find them," he ordered the sensor teams. "Find that ship now." But the scans showed nothing. No trace. No heat. No signal. As if the giant vessel had never existed at all. Out in the Kuiper expanse, Admiral Kane stood watching as a new data stream appeared on the display. The first wave had taken heavier losses, but they were still holding. The timer read, 57 hours remaining. Begin slow advance, Kane ordered. Half speed. Keep formation tight. The massive ships began to move, their engines igniting like silent suns. Space seemed to warp around them, bending under the gravitational pull of their mass. Smaller escort ships flanked the dreadnoughts, their weapons powered but cold to any distant sensors. It would look like the background noise of the void. Kane glanced at Rourke. No contact until my signal. When we strike, I want them to see the face of humanity and remember it for the rest of their days. Meanwhile, in New Eden's underground command center, Captain Alara monitored the defense grid. The colony's outer shields flickered under the constant barrage from Imperial cruisers. Her officers looked tense. How much longer? One asked. Ilaros' voice was calm. Long enough. She checked the timer in her private display. She knew the main fleet was moving now. Slowly, patiently, just as planned. And when it arrived, the galaxy would never forget. Asterisk, the siege of New Eden had entered its second day. The Galactic Empire's warships tightened their formation around the planet, their weapons pounding against the colony's shields. The once bright blue glow of the defensive barrier now flickered weakly, rippling under every impact. On the blood-sovereign commander Sareth stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the tactical display. The human colony was close to collapse, yet the unease in his chest would not fade. How much longer until their shields fail? He demanded. 10 hours at most, replied the chief engineer. Sareth nodded, but his gaze stayed cold. 10 hours should have been comforting, the end of another human world. But instead, it felt like a countdown to something he could not see. In the asteroid field beyond New Eden, the first wave of human ships remained hidden, their crews running silent. Many vessels were badly damaged, hulls scorched, weapons nearly depleted. Still, they held their position, obeying a single order from Captain Elara Voss. Do not engage unless absolutely necessary. Inside her command center, beneath the colony's surface, Elara studied the updated battle map. Every passing hour meant more pressure on the shield generators, more strain on the engineers keeping the power flowing. Her second officer approached. Captain, the Empire launches a full bombardment. We won't hold. We should use the first wave to strike now. Elara shook her head. No, the first wave's job is not to win. It's to keep them looking in the wrong direction. She glanced at the secure timer on her console. 41 hours remained. If the main fleet stayed on course, they would arrive with just enough time to break the siege. But Sareth was growing impatient. He had received 3 more reports of missing patrols in the outer system. The sensor logs showed strange distortions, shadows moving where no mass should be, shapes far larger than any known human ship. When Sareth presented the findings to his senior staff, they argued over explanations. Some called it debris, others blamed faulty sensors. Sareth silenced them with a single order. We will crush this colony before whatever is hiding out there arrives. The fleet began to shift. Hundreds of capital ships moved into bombardment range, their weapons charging for a final, overwhelming strike. The movement was noticed in New Eden's underground bunkers. A low, rolling tremor ran through the ground as Imperial capital guns powered up. Lights flickered in the shelter corridors. Children cried. Parents held them close. In the command center, Elara received the data feed from orbit. She could see the heat signatures of hundreds of weapons targeting the colony. Her comms officer looked at her, pale. "Captain, they're preparing for a full surface strike." Ilara took a slow breath. "Then it's time." She keyed a secure channel to the first wave. "All ships, initiate shadow step." One by one, the small, battered human vessels emerged from the asteroid field, but not to attack the Empire directly. Instead, they darted in and out of firing lanes, harassing the outer flanks, forcing Imperial ships to adjust their targeting. Every move was calculated to delay the final bombardment without committing to a full battle. From the Blood Sovereign, Sereth snarled, "They're stalling again. Destroy them." Imperial destroyers broke formation to chase the smaller human ships, exactly as Ilara had hoped. And then it happened. The stars behind the Blood Sovereign began to vanish. One after another, points of light simply went dark, as if swallowed by something vast. On the Imperial bridge, sensor alarms screamed. "What is that?" Sereth demanded. The answer came too late. From the void emerged shapes so massive they seemed impossible, dark holes, kilometers long, bristling with weapons. They moved in perfect silence, their sheer presence dwarfing even the Empire's largest battleships. The lead ship's bow caught the light of the distant sun, revealing the faint insignia of a human eagle, black against the steel. In New Eden's command center, Ilara saw the sensor spikes appear. Her chest tightened. They were here. She opened a secure channel. "This is Captain Voss to Fleet Command." Signal confirmed. "Welcome to New Eden, Admiral." Far out in orbit, the Indomitable replied with Admiral Kane's voice, calm, steady. "And cold, we'll take it from here, Captain." On the Blood Sovereign, panic rippled through the bridge crew. Sereth stared at the incoming fleet, his mind struggling to accept the scale of what he was seeing. This can't be there." "Main force," one officer stammered. Sereth's claws dug into the arm of his command chair. "It is," he said, "and they've been waiting for us to be exactly where we are right now." The comms officer turned, pale. "Commander, we're detecting only a fraction of their total power output." Sereth's eyes narrowed. "A fraction," the officer swallowed. "Yes, sir, they're holding back." In the final moments of the part, the main fleet's forward guns ignited, a soft glow, almost gentle compared to what was coming. The deep, resonant hum returned, rolling through every Imperial ship in the system like the heartbeat of something ancient and unstoppable. The Galactic Empire had reached its breaking point. Asterisk, the void around New Eden burned with tension. The Galactic Empire's vast armada hung in orbit, its formation tight, weapons locked on the human colony below. But beyond them, blocking the starlight, the humanity main fleet had arrived. They came without fanfare, no drums, no grand announcement, just the silent advance of steel giants, each ship a city, each one carrying more firepower than most civilizations could dream of. At the front was the dreadnought, Indomitable. Its hull was a black wall against the stars, broken only by the silver crest of the human eagle. In the command chair, Admiral Kane leaned forward, his eyes locked on the enemy fleet. "Status?" he asked. "All ships in position, Admiral," Captain Rourke replied. "Weapons at full charge. Targeting data locked." Kane's gaze hardened. "Open a channel to the Imperial flagship." On the Blood Sovereign, Commander Sareth's comms officer looked up nervously. "Sir, incoming transmission. Origin. Human fleet." Sareth gave a sharp nod. "Put it through." The view screen flickered, and Admiral Kane appeared, calm, unmoving, his voice cold as ice. "This is Admiral Kane of the Terran main fleet," he he said. What you've been fighting is our first wave. A handful of ships. Old ships. Ships meant to slow you down. Sereth's jaw tightened, his claws curling against the armrest. Kane leaned closer, his voice dropping into something that was almost a whisper. This is not our full force. The channel cut without another word. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Indomitable fired. A single beam of white light shot across the void, striking an Imperial battleship at the edge of the formation. There was no explosion. The ship simply ceased to exist, erased from reality in less than a second, before the shock could fade. The rest of the main fleet joined in. Titan-class rail cannons tore through multiple targets with each shot. Energy lances sliced capital ships in half. Missile swarms blotted out entire sectors of the sky before detonating in perfect synchronization. The Imperial fleet, thousands strong, disintegrated in minutes. But Kane wasn't destroying them all. His orders were precise: disable, not annihilate. Leave them alive enough to remember. Inside the Blood Sovereign, chaos reigned. Officers shouted over each other, alarms screamed, and sparks rained from overloaded systems. They're targeting our weapons. Our engines are offline, shields collapsing. Another voice: they're not finishing us off, they're letting us live. Sareth realized the truth. This wasn't just victory, this was a message. Humanity wanted the Empire to understand exactly how powerless they were, and to spread that fear across the stars. On New Eden's surface, the sky lit up with streaks of fire as crippled Imperial ships tumbled into the atmosphere. Colony children watched from bunker windows, their eyes wide in the command center. Captain Alara Voss stood in silence, listening to the comms feed from the Indomitable. The battle above was one-sided. It wasn't a fight, it was an execution. Her second officer whispered, "Captain, the main fleet could have ended this in seconds." "They could have," Alara said quietly. "But fear lasts longer when you give it time to grow." Above, Admiral Kane watched as the remnants of the once proud Imperial Armada scattered. Some ships fled at full speed, jumping blindly into hyperspace. Others surrendered, their crews too shaken to even attempt escape. "Report," Kane ordered. 17 minutes since engagement began, Rourke replied. "Imperial fleet reduced to 30% combat capacity. No human losses." Kane gave a short nod. "That's enough. Pull us back. Leave them the pieces to crawl home with." The massive dreadnoughts began to turn, their engines igniting with a deep, rolling hum that carried across the void the same sound the Empire had heard days ago and failed to understand. On the bridge of the Blood Sovereign, Sereth watched the human fleet withdraw. The scale of what he had seen was almost beyond comprehension. "They could have wiped us out," his second officer whispered. "They didn't need to," Sareth replied. His voice was low, almost reverent. This was their way of telling us that next time, they won't hold back. In the final moments, the camera pulls back into the darkness of space. The battered Imperial survivors limp away. The humans vanish into the black, their massive hulls swallowed by the void. A narrator's voice cuts in, calm and heavy. Across the galaxy, they whispered of the day the main fleet moved, and every commander who heard the tale understood the same truth. Humanity had only just begun to show its face.